Chapter 5. Beep, 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 beep. Fergus's eyes snapped open. It was 7 o'clock. He reached out and slammed his hand down on top of his alarm clock. The peeping stopped. I'll just have half a minute more in bed, he whispered to himself. Half a minute. Half an hour later, he woke for a second time and looked around the room groggily. 3 nights of staying up till midnight were beginning to take their toll. He sat up, pushed the quilt away and stretched. Then he caught sight of the mechanical box perched above his head on the window ledge, its injured wing trailing on one side. He reached into his pyjama pocket and took out the letter and read it again. He frowned. Long lost Uncle Theo. His mother had never mentioned an Uncle Theo. And what did he mean? You are in great danger. Danger from what? He certainly didn't feel in any great danger. I'm sending help. Fergus wasn't sure he liked the sound of that. What sort of help? And what would his mother say? Fergus glanced at the clock again. It was 7:35. His mother would already be hard at work downstairs in the bakery. He would have to get a move on, otherwise he'd be late for school, and Captain Claw didn't take kindly to boys or girls who arrived late for school. Fergus didn't want to spend the whole day halfway up the rigging practicing semaphore. Not again. Although the last time he and Bolivia the parrot had ended up having quite a good time. Springing into action, Fergus grabbed Practical Potholing for Beginners, stuffed it in his backpack and dashed downstairs. In the kitchen, he quickly devoured the breakfast croissant his mother had left out for him and snatched his lunchbox from the fridge. Back in the bathroom, he brushed his teeth, then swinging his backpack up onto his shoulders, he hurried from the apartment. The front door slammed behind him. It was 7:43. Fergus fairly flew down the stairs, skidding round at each landing before racing down the next flight. If Miss Jemima Gum had emerged from her first-story apartment a split second earlier, then she and her canaries, fluttering in the large cage on pram wheels, would have been sent flying. As it was, she was merely dragged along a couple of steps in Fergus's slipstream as he dashed past. "Oh, Fergus!" she called, her voice as high and twittery as one of her beloved birds. "Do thank your dear mother for the caraway seeds, so kind." Her eyes darted back and forth behind her steel-rimmed spectacles. "You haven't seen the Bigsby Clutterbucks's cat, have you, dear? Dreadful creature." "No, Miss Gum." Fergus's voice floated back up the stairwell. He reached the entrance hall and hurried across the cold marble tiles. Madame Lavinia and Arturo Squeegee were both checking their mail. Fergus skidded to a halt and tried to squeeze his way between them. "Good morning, Mr. Squeegee," he said. "Good morning, Madame Lavinia." Madame Lavinia turned round, her large string of amber beads clacking at her neck, her hair a haystack of frizzy orange peppered with gold hair clips. "Oh, Fergus, my little maestro," she laughed, a sound like the tinkling of an out-of-tune piano. "What's the rush?" "Late for school, old man." Arturo Squeegee looked up from his letterbox, brandishing a lilac-scented letter, his jet black toupee glistening on his head. "Oh, to be young again, eh, Madame Lavinia? Although in your case, lovely lady, you don't look a day over 21. Arturo took Madame Lavinia's hand and gave it a theatrical kiss. "Oh, Mr. Squeegee," laughed Madame Lavinia, the amber beads clacking noisily. "You're too much, you really are." Fergus slipped past them. "Have a good day," trilled Madame Lavinia. "Splice that main brace, old chap," called Arturo Squeegee. "Thank you," Fergus called back. "I shall." Reaching the door, Fergus opened it up and stepped out onto the street. It was 7:51. Since he was setting off 6 minutes later than usual, he'd have to run extra fast. As he raced past Biederbecker's bakery, Fergus paused, as he did, every day to wave in through the window. Mrs. Crane had been at work since 5 o'clock, and Fergus knew she'd like to see him before he went to school, even if it was through the glass of a shop window. She looked up, a tired expression on her face, which vanished the moment she saw Fergus, to be replaced by a radiant smile. She gestured to his backpacks and mouthed the word lunch and box exaggeratedly. Yes, I've got my lunchbox, Fergus muttered. He raised a thumb to show her he'd understood and dashed off. He sped past the cafes and shops, past Antonio, the hurdy-gurdy man, and the spot where Wall-Eyed Ned paraded back and forwards in front of the theatre. He dashed down a side alley past the bagel stall and on down to the canal, where he sprinted along the canal side. As he rounded Cyclops Point, where the old harbour lighthouse stood, the sails and masts of the Betty Jean came into view. Without easing up for a moment, Fergus dashed along the quayside and skidded to a halt at the gangplank. Beside it, a small signpost read, "The school ship Betty Jean," in gold letters above a picture of a rather stern-looking mermaid in a mortarboard. "Good morning, screeched a voice, and Fergus looked up to see Bolivia, Captain Claw's red and blue parrot, perched on the balustrade at the top of the plank. Look at the time! "I know," said Fergus. He crossed the swaying gangplank. "Don't tell Captain Claw, Bolivia, or it'll be the rigging for me." Waving flags, said Bolivia, jumping from one foot to the other. Fergus grinned. "Yes, I know you like semaphore practice," he said, "but I know something you like even more." He swung the backpack from his shoulders and pulled out his lunchbox. Florentines! Bolivia squawked excitedly. Yes, said Fergus, but keep it down. We don't want the whole school to hear." Fergus looked at the lunchbox. What the? It wasn't his old familiar lunchbox, which was actually an old Biederbecker cake tin held shut with a piece of string. No, this lunchbox was brand new and shiny, with little buttons along its top and small doors and compartments. On one side, a small label said, "The Lunchomatic, the Fateful Voyage Trading Company." In his rush to get to school, Fergus hadn't even looked at it. Now that he did, he could see that as lunchboxes went, this was clearly an expensive one. He pressed one of the buttons on the lid. A little door clicked open and a nutty, chocolatey, caramelly aroma wafted out. Bolivia clacked her beak. Florentines, she squawked. My favourite! Fergus smiled. Ever since he had started at the school ship Betty Jean 2 terms ago, Bolivia and he had been the best of friends. And all because of the cakes and pastries that Fergus's mother packed in his little lunch box. Sometimes he would give the parrot a little piece of croissant, sometimes some walnut eclair or a corner of flapjack. Her absolute favourites, however, were Archduke Ferdinand's Florentines. Fergus remembered his first day at school with a shudder. Although almost 9 years old, he had never been to school before. His mother simply couldn't afford it, so she'd done her best to teach him at home after work, and sometimes at work. Fergus smiled. Writing stories at night and doing maths at the cake counter had been fun, and he'd loved the afternoons, exploring the neighbourhood and making friends with everyone. But all that had changed when the Betty Jean had sailed into the harbour and docked at the canal quayside. Fergus remembered how excited his mother had been when she read one of the bill posters that Captain Claw had stuck up all over town. The school ship Betty Jean, it had said, offers all the benefits of a top-class education with the proven virtues of the nautical way of life. Absolutely free. The word free was in extra large letters, with a picture of the mermaid in a mortarboard pointing at it for added effect. "Look, Fergus," his mother had said, "they're looking for young, able-bodied students, must be agile, athletic, good at squeezing through small spaces." "Oh, Fergus," she cried, "you're exactly what they're looking for. And just think, you get a top-class education absolutely free." "But I already get an education absolutely free," Fergus had mumbled. But when he had looked at his mother's face, her excitement giving way to a look of love and concern, he had known that her mind was made up. So it was that on the appointed afternoon, along with dozens of others, Fergus had gone along to the tall-masted clipper for an interview. Dressed in his smartest clothes and with his hair slicked down, he'd been asked questions by Captain Claw, like, "How tall are you, lad?" and "Are you afraid of small spaces?" and been made to climb to the top of the rigging. At the end of it all, the captain had turned to Mrs. Crane and said, "Congratulations, madam. We'll make a scholar and a seaman out of your little treasure." Which is how Fergus had found himself at the age of nearly 9, and never having been to school before in his life, walking up the gangplank on the first day of term, feeling very small and a little frightened, and making friends with a parrot. Fergus glanced at his watch and groaned. It was 11 minutes past 8. He was already 11 minutes late for his first lesson, gym class with Mr. Woodhead. He took the Florentine out of his strange new lunchbox and gave it to the parrot, who promptly flew up to the crow's nest, or, as the children on the Betty Jean called it, the parrot's nest, at the top of the mast. 12 minutes past, Fergus groaned, checking his watch again. Any later, and he'd end up on barnacle scraping duty. Things were looking almost as bad as on that very first day on board the Betty Jean. To start with, he'd had to meet his new classmates, or shipmates, as they were instructed to call each other. They were all lined up in a row on the foredeck. There was big, beefy Horace Tucker, with his mass of unruly straw-like hair and spectacles held together with sticky tape. Next to him was little Tessa Maas, smaller than Fergus, with a black bob and dark, serious eyes. The others soon nicknamed her Mouse. Then there was Sylvie Smith, with her ginger plaits, long freckled legs and knock knees. And finally, Jimmy Spike Thompson, who was just a little taller than Fergus, but much stockier and twice as strong. And that was it. The entire school. A mere handful of pupils. For of all the many hopefuls who had applied to join the school ship Betty Jean, Captain Claw had selected only 5. Certainly they were a motley crew, Fergus had to admit, from all parts of town, and with only one thing in common. None of them had parents who could afford to send them to either Montmorency Academy or Harbour Heights. After that first awkward meeting, however, they'd soon become friends. Horace was the class joker and clown. Mouse fussed over them all, and Spike was brave and fearless, and took it upon himself to protect Sylvie, who was the nervous, tearful type. And then there was Fergus, amiable, happy-go-lucky, a little short for his age perhaps, but excellent at getting on with people. Yes, they were a motley crew all right, though they were nothing compared to the teachers aboard the Betty Jean. Fergus might never have been to school before, but he knew what teachers looked like. They looked like Dr. Fassbinder. They wore old tweed jackets with leather patches at the elbows. They had long striped scarves from their university days, and were always losing their spectacles when in fact they were on a chain around their neck the whole time. But the teachers on board the Betty Jean were nothing like Dr. Fassbinder. There was Mr. Spicer, with his big hooped earrings and red beard. He was meant to teach geography, but all they ever seemed to study was caves and tunnels and potholing for beginners. Then there was Mrs. Blood, the science teacher, who liked gunpowder and cannons and didn't seem to wash very much. And Mr. Woodhead, who taught Jim with his eye patch and tattoos of mermaids on his arms. Fergus was pretty sure the mermaid in the mortarboard on the school sign had been copied from Mr. Woodhead's right forearm. And then in his filthy apron there was Mr. Gilroy. He had a wooden leg carved like a table leg with notches, 12 in all, carved down one side. He was the school cook, although as everyone brought lunch boxes, he only ever cooked for the teachers, which was just as well, judging by the smells coming out of the galley of the Betty Jean. But perhaps the strangest teacher of them all was Captain Claw himself. Fergus hung his backpack up on his hook in the cloak cabin and struggled into his gym kit. He checked his watch. 14 minutes passed. He rushed across the foredeck, past the headmaster's cabin, and "Ooh!" he croaked as a hooked hand shot out from the open doorway and snagged the back of his vest.